reality. And European elitism is not something we can afford. Now, it's good for older generation to talk about European Union being this great economy that's just been rising and having a great time over the last 2 decades. But you know what? For people of our generation, people who turned 20 in 2008, it hasn't been such a rosy ride after all. Okay? We think that it is important to bring TTIP today, to bring it forward, because we think that it has huge potential for the European market. What we face today is European population that is aging, that is shrinking, and European economy that has been stagnating and is also shrinking. And we think that TTIP is actually a great way for Europe to benefit from the US rebounding economy. It is also a great way for us to concentrate on our strategic interest geopolitically, right? Because we see lots of countries outside of Europe rising. We see China that's becoming stronger and stronger. We see African countries becoming bigger economies, countries in Southeast Asia too. So we think we should get on that wagon now before US starts to deal with somebody else. All right. So what has Tom, I'm going to talk more about that, how it's important to talk about, to bring it now, why it's actually good for Europe, it's good for Finland, and I'm going to also talk about how it's important, it is possible to overcome the problems that have been outlined by previous speakers about ISDS or the investor protection. Okay, so over the last 50 years that we've had ISDS or the investor protection around the world, we have had 600 cases altogether, right, that's been run in the last 50 years. Most of them came in the last 15 years, but only 400 of them actually proceeded to court. Like, out of all of those cases, the opposition brings to us one scary example. Like, if one legal precedent would determine the rest of legal history, we think that's a slippery slope and we don't want to go there, right? So we think that there could be scary examples. That is not to say that it's going to continue this way. It is absolutely possible to devise a neat system that strikes the balance between private and public interest. There are great ways to achieve that, right? We can have more exact and careful wording. Some of the criticism for the ISDS has been that the wording is very abstract, that what defines public interest is up to the interpretation of the panel of 3 men, sometimes women. Now we can define that, right? We know this happens, so we can reform that. Good thing that the talks are still, ongoing. We also think that we can make the arbitration more transparent, and that's great too, because that will also reduce the ability of big corporations to bully governments. Because once it becomes like a public frenzy, and John Oliver talks about it, all of a sudden everybody's an expert on Philip Morris and their arbitration in Australia. So we think that once that mechanism is in place, it already reduces the ability of corporations to bully our governments, because it's not good business to be seen as a huge bully, right? And we also think that having a transparent panel for the procedures, the great introduction has introduced to us that there could be right now there is no legal system that arbitrates those courts. We could introduce that, we could negotiate all of those risks and still benefit from the system. Okay. Any questions from the group?
Yeah. The reason why we don't have that many cases, we can cite more cases if you want that, but the reason why they haven't gone so far could be because that states have simply backed down out of their commitments to introduce new legislation.
Well, yeah, that was a problem of the past. Like I said, we can reform those things. Legal system wasn't a great 50 years ago, okay? We're still okay to call people N-words and be homophobic, okay? So, we can improve things, all I'm saying. So why is this good for Europe? I have already pointed out, right? We need radically to boost our growth. We need to open up the system. It's absolutely stupid that a Finnish company like EFI, who creates and manufactures lights for the runway, not the catwalk, but the flights runway, and they're the best in the industry, and it's probably the best company from Finland that you've never heard of. Now that company can't actually export their great invention and the great business that they have to the US because of red tape, because of some regulation in the US that they can't overcome. Now, also because it's not such a big company to begin with, and that's one of the key arguments why this is good for Finland, or for Europe and for small and medium-sized companies, because at the moment they don't actually have great resources and experience to research all the different legislation, how they register the company, how they operate in a different market. And we think that with opening up the borders, with great benefit for traditional Finnish industries like wood and construction and water that are heavily regulated at the moment. Once those regulations are lifted, it's all going to be better. So for all these reasons, we propose.